Welcome to the Ashby Room. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with two guests, Maurin Lenglart and Vijay Ramakrishnan. Mo is the Director of Engineering at Alteryx, where he is focused on data transformation, and Vijay is the Principal Software Engineering Manager at Microsoft, focused on tools for software developers. In this episode, we discuss the difference in engineering roles at startups versus large enterprises, people management in engineering versus specialization, and how to think about the changes that AI is bringing to the software development world, with low-code, no-code frameworks as a reference point. And as always, I asked Mo and Vijay about the decisions that they made that led to their current positions in their careers. Without further ado, please enjoy this pleasant conversation with Mo and Vijay.
Right now, I started off in the languages and the frameworks team. So initially worked on helping build web frameworks. Like for example, if you're a software developer who wants to build an API, for example, so we help them with like providing the right frameworks for it. And then a few years I worked on that, and then I moved on to building tools for software developers. So that's where currently I am. So I help build different kind of tools. So if a software developer comes in the morning and they want to get their job started, they probably start off with an environment, and I help build the environment, help build the tools for being productive on a day-to-day basis for a software developer.
Majority is internal tools then.
No, so Microsoft is a company like
Yeah.
we help provide tools for any software developer for any language. So these days, like I don't know, Mo might know, like VS Code is one of those big examples where any developer who comes from non-Microsoft background as well, they rely on these tools that we help build for them to be productive.
If you had to guess, what's the user base like size? How many people use the
Um,
tools you make?
So my specific tool, the tool that I help build is more called Visual Studio, and that one definitely has like on a month to month we help like 5 to 10 million developers.
Wow, that's awesome. And then Mo, maybe a little smaller scale, but I'm not quite sure the size of Alteryx. Maybe you can tell us what you do.
So Alteryx is a data analytics company, and essentially our core is to sell our products to auditing firms like Deloitte or finance companies like Goldman Sachs. And it helps business analysts who are not that technical to enable them to do data transformation, essentially, auditing, things like that. So I've been there for 2 years and a half now. I was working in a smaller company called L'Oreal, and we got acquired by Alteryx. Now, what I do is essentially I lead three different teams. The first one is product-led growth, essentially how by the product we can increase our adoption. The second one is our marketplace, so building an ecosystem around Alteryx. And the third one is app builder. How do you build low, without coding, applications that you can then expose to business users who are not technical at all to expose data or expose database applications to them?
Awesome. We've talked about low code, no code, the emergence in the last 5 years. We have two very interesting or very different perspectives today. Yours is large enterprise, yours is the startup world. Can you both talk about low code, no code, what it means to software engineers and what it means to like a firm that needs to build some application or website? What does it mean to have these tools available to them nowadays? Maybe Vijay first.
Yeah, sure. Great question. How I think about it is that I wouldn't partition them as helping directly like a software engineer. So how I look at the no code, low code world is let's imagine that you're in a healthcare company, for example. So today you might rely a lot on having a software developer build the reports for you, for example, or you want to quickly build an app for maybe internal consumption to get them data out of it. So today a lot of these businesses are tied by the requirement of having a software developer to get through one of these tasks. So to me, the low code, no code world is actually going to bridge that gap where you have a need, you have a requirement that needs to be fulfilled, And today, you need a software developer to fulfill the need for you. It's basically bridging that gap, giving them the right tools, which may be like very easily automatable in a sense. So that's where I see this no code, low code world actually helping a lot of these customers.
Is that the same for you with data analytics?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to add on to that, I think today there are really two big problems. The first one is that engineers are costly and it's hard to find, and there's a lack of engineering in the world. So a lot of time you have requirements and you cannot find an engineering team to build that thing, and that could really help your processes. The second one is the fact that engineers are not business users. If you might need to have an app in finance, but then the engineers won't have the domain knowledge, so they're gonna build something, but they cannot really verify if it works or not. While the finance people, they can verify if it works, but they don't know how to build it. So it creates huge communication gaps where everyone need to really be in sync, and that create really long life cycles for building software. While if you can empower the finance folks, for example, to build their own things, then it's gonna completely reduce the cost for everyone, and the app will be way more tailored to what their needs are.
Yeah, we talked about this last night. The subject matter expert in finance isn't the software engineer. So you have to have this close interaction or iterative back and forth to make sure the requirements are met. But when you make a low code, no code environment for a SME that they'll build it, there's also shortcomings. It's not perfect, right? Do you guys have any experiences with that?
Yes, but that's the biggest shortcoming is that they won't be able to really understand the logic. So even in low-code apps, you need to have some programming logic. Like it's extremely rigorous, right? Yeah. And like the domain experts won't have that rigor that you need to have in programming, for example. But that still is the problem, because then they can get support by engineers to fix problems here and there without the need to have a full-time engineer to completely understand everything. They can narrow down the problem, and it's more easily fixable.
I have this maybe naive idea, right? You've got a senior engineer with 5 years, 10 years experience, and they would solve this logic problem. Like they would figure out how to make something work. But can they be replaced by somebody from the specific industry who has taken a boot camp with low-code, no-code tools? Is there a path there, or do you see some obstacles?
No, please go.
No, I think there's a path. I think that's really where we are going. It's to bring some more technical skills to all the domain experts. Like you can see in business schools, there's more and more classes around 101 programming, 101 SQL, whatever. And that's really the path. Is like once they understand that rigor, then they could more accurately use and build those apps using low-code applications. And I think in 10 years from now, we pretty much won't need engineers to focus on high-level apps, but focus more on low-code, the core platforming stuff.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So, great point, Mo. So, I think it's how we are looking at a lot of these things, right? Like low code, no code. I think we shouldn't probably be suddenly like jumping in, telling that, okay, this is going to replace the world or things like that. There are going to be a lot of data intensive things that probably needs to happen. So it is going to be a harmony. I would say there's going to be software developers who might build the best APIs that can be provided for this. So which means these tools would come in and they would just gel in to reduce the work that's needed. So you probably don't need that full-time effort from a software developer, but you can still get the things done with that right kind of synchrony that goes between the two.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I also, we talked yesterday about how maybe a bank needs a website or a phone application because that's how the user will access their account. But what about generative AI nowadays? Like, can we do away with a UI that a team has to build, some application that a team has to build, and use natural language processing to access your bank account or to make reservations? Do you have some thoughts on that?
Amazing point. I think a lot of people are trying to find these answers these days. So, I think generative AI will have a space in the next, 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, 10 year. How it's exactly going to impact us, I think that will keep evolving as well. I don't think we might, tomorrow we can come in and say that we don't need apps anymore, right? So it's going to be a journey that we are going to go through. We had our 90s with your client server architecture. You had your apps that, you had your desktop applications that were built and things like that. In the 2000s, you had got into the mobile app development phase. Now I think we are evolving into this new AI world where we might have to rethink a lot of the assumptions about what is that user interface going to look like. And user interface has always been a thing to solve a problem. We should really get in the root of what is the problem that we are trying to solve. Should we have to keep doing the same way we are doing it, or is there a different way to do it?
Awesome. Any input on that?
I think we'll need to rethink a lot of apps, but at the same time, I think we'll need another generation of generative AI. Today, the biggest problem that I see with generative AI is you can only input text. So you cannot add rigor to it, like the rigor that we're just talking about. You never know what's going to be the answer from generative AI. It's really hard to predict what they're going to say in advance. And so today we are at a generation where it's going to be a great assistant. It's going to be a great help, but you cannot just rely on generative AI. You always need someone on top of it to help support. Like, to take the bank account thing, like if you ask a transfer and it's not exactly what you want, that's going to create huge problems. So I don't think we're at a place where we can really rely on it. We can get information from it, we can get support, help, but that's it. So it's like, we'll need to see the evolution.
We we're talking about maybe a 5-year, 10-year time frame for some of these things, but I looked on Alteryx LinkedIn and there was this post today. The Alteryx AI platform for enterprise analytics is here. Effective immediately, you can leverage integrated generative and conversational AI. Like there's stuff happening today. Can you talk about what you guys are doing with generative AI?
Yeah, so we are doing a couple things. The first one is just, so essentially we have like the core of our business is a data transformation tool. So we're building a copilot to help you build your data transformation. So you can say, and it's not gonna do it for you, but it's gonna build a canvas, it's gonna build a template and help you go and try to understand what you want and help you bootstrap all of that and help you support. So really an assistant. The other thing that we are doing is a platform where you can deploy LLMs, build agents, and do your own thing in the context of your company. So you can train your data set, you can give some specific information to your company, and you can build a chatbot on top of it. That's a builder aspect that I'm working on, which is building low-code apps. So it's how do you add LLM into your low-code apps to build an application that then you can expose to other people.
I always like to bring up when people say Copilot or assistant. I always like to bring up Clippy, like
yeah, exactly,
ahead of its time maybe. But are we going to see a new Clippy now that all this hype is coming around, all this effort is around generative AI?
Yeah, I think co-pilots, that's going to be the future,
But you're not going to name it Clippy 2 or anything like that.
But it's Clippy 2.0. It's exactly what Clippy wanted to be. It's like generative AI. And I think that's a great way of saying it. It's like, it doesn't do the work for you, but it helps you and it can understand way more. It can understand what you're trying to do and support you in that.
Right. Yeah, a lot of engineers I know now they're all using ChatGPT to get started. Like, how do I approach this problem? And then it's a starting point. Even in a creative field, you use ChatGPT like for building trust-based relationships. We built Rajiv built this GPT for dissecting how to ask questions in a more meaningful way. And I was like, well, that's a very niche application, but I could see people actually using it. And there's definitely more practical applications or more applications that will have a larger user base for sure.
Right. I think from a generative AI perspective, I see two areas having a huge impact right away. Like, for example, for software developers, help with coding. Like, there are lots of boilerplate code that we keep on adding. There are lots of tools that actually help with, making that life easy for a software developer. Another one is education, like Khan Academy, for example, right? Like, there are lots of places where you probably need more adaptive learning tools, where it is more tailor-made for understanding the needs of what they want and having tailor-made solutions for them. So there are definitely places where you can have an easier and impactful impact, much easier than the rest of some of the other industries.
Yeah, maybe no finished products come out of it. Everything you kind of have to review, but it's always a great starting point, great learning tool. I've used it for some of the subjects in the MBA course, right? It's really good to say, hey, can you explain this specific concept
Right.
a little better, because I didn't get that, and it'll take that conversation and answer it for you. Maybe switch subjects. You're both engineering managers. You manage people. I don't know. Maybe first question is the split between people management and engineering work that you currently do, and then how you made the transition and why you made the transition. Maybe Mo first this time.
So I made the transition in the previous startup I was at. Initially, I was a IC, individual contributor, and then over time we hired more people and I became a manager over there. And once we got acquired, that's when I became director and I started managing managers. Now the split is I'm coding for fun. I'm not coding for work. I don't need to code for work. But I think it's extremely important to code for fun, just to be up to date and to understand. Like when LLM came out, I did a project with LLM just because I needed to understand how it works, what are the limitations, or what are the possibilities with it. But day to day in my work, I think the most technical thing is I talk a lot to architects and to our architecture group, to whenever we do a project, to understand what are the different components, how everything gonna talk, what are the different domains, and what should each team be responsible of. So it's still highly technical, but it's not at the coding level.
Yeah. How about you, Vijay?
Similar. I started off as an IC. I really like writing code. So I started off with it. I wrote code for a long time. And then the more and more senior you get, the more time you spend helping others get through, because a lot of new engineers actually need that help, need that mentoring to be successful. And I really liked seeing that success come out of a lot of these other people. That's how I transitioned into the manager role. But, as Mo was telling, like, that's one of the fun things that I look at. It's not required from a work perspective. I still, whatever prototypes or things like that I can do at work, I still do it for fun. Definitely I code. One of the examples I always tell is like, you never see like a sports team where you have a captain, where you say that, okay, the captain doesn't have to play, the rest of the people, let's let them go and play. It's mostly like you have to be in there, you have to be with the people, and you're rowing the ship together, like rowing the boat together. So that's how I look at it from this. So.
No, I don't know if it was Google or some other big tech, right? They introduced this idea of the, staff engineer, the lead engineer, like just technical specialty. You don't have to manage people, but you can get paid. You can still move up. I imagine that was an option for both of you. How did you choose to, go the management route and not the, just technical special, just IC route?
Do you want to take it?
Okay. I think for me, it's just the limitation of what I could do by myself. So that was always one frustration. Is like I can code, but at some point my time is limited. And if I can lead a team, it's easier to have a vision and to be able to go in that direction and to see that vision get realized. The second thing is also, I really like working with people, empowering people. Like it's really rewarding when you see someone stepping up. And I really like doing that job of like helping people grow and seeing them grow in their career. And that's something that's way more valuable when you start managing people than when you're an IC.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I think you raised a really good point. Like in the industry, there was a time for sure where, getting into management is the only way going forward. So what happens is there could be people who are really good at what they do, but management is also an acquired skill. And, what you're looking for, what the expectations are going to be very different with people as well. So I'm really glad that a lot of companies are recognizing and actually giving positions for, people to actually go up as individual contributors. I mean, they're probably not spending their time coding, but I'm sure like they are helping architects, they are helping design systems and things like that. For me, definitely one of the decision points for me was I really helping people. So in the team, I was spending the time, even though I was not officially a manager at that point, it was more like I was helping these junior engineers actually, get them to lead together, get it going, and then later it became official. And I really wanted to do that job, so I really like the management position.
You definitely have that reputation. I think in class, you're like the first person to raise your hand and help people. It was like Aditi and I forget who else, but they were stuck on a problem studying in the Ashby room, and they're like, "Oh, I'll call Vijay," and then somebody else was like, "Oh no, I'll call Vijay." They had you on speed dial, but I definitely see that in your personality, and I think both, maybe it's an attraction or some commonality for the MBA program here. It's like, I'm going to shift gears a little bit, but maybe first a mental shift. Do you guys have any questions for each other based off of the things we just discussed?
It's a tough one.
How about table it? Think about it.
Sure.
Let's do a little like early life, just a few minutes. Maybe Vijay first. Where were you born? How did you get to where you are today? Maybe some struggles in your life, like what's stood out that you think could be useful to highlight for somebody in a similar background as you?
Oh, great. I was born back in India. I did my schooling. I did my undergraduate degree in electrical engineering. I actually did it in a place that's like far away from my home. I was born in the southern part of India and did my electrical engineering degree 2,000 kilometers away from, because I wanted to see the world. At that point, I didn't get a chance to move all the way out, but whatever I could, I just moved there because I really like meeting people along the way, getting to know the culture, getting to know language. So it was a very interesting experience that I had. And, I was in this place where I didn't even know the language that they speak. So it was a learning mechanism. It was adjusting and things like that. And I got an opportunity after that to come to US as part of a consulting job. And that's how I started into the software world in US. And then I have this craving for learning more and more. I decided that, okay, it's 6-7 years into my initial consulting career, I decided that I had to go back to school and learn, get my master's in computer engineering. So I went back, learned, and that's how I started my career at Microsoft. Learnings, one thing I always tell myself is, there is no such thing as, born brilliant or things like that. I always think that, you have to put in the effort, keep the hard work, and then, you will get the gains out of it. So really, I suggest people don't go with the stereotypical things about that. Like, just do the hard work and, the success will just come after you.
Great. How about you, Mo?
So I grew up in France mostly, but then I also spent 5 years when I was a child in Brazil. Then when I during my studies, I spent 1 year in China, 1 year in London, and I finished my master's in the US. And I think that's what I would recommend is travel a lot. And especially for engineers, I think that was the best decision I could take for my career, was to come to the Silicon Valley and start working here. There's a lot of, we all know that it's the Silicon Valley, right? So that will be a good advice. Then I think the biggest thing for me, it was find a place where I have fun. It's I agree with Vijay, it's everything can be, you can work and become brilliant by working, but you will have that motivation to work only if you find a place where it becomes a passion, it's become fun, and it's something that you're ready to do on your own free time, or you're gonna read things about it, or you're gonna do projects about it. It's especially in engineering, you can see that there's a you cannot go here and come for the money. You need to come here because you really enjoy it and you want to build something and you want to have fun building that thing.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. I didn't realize you traveled so much. And it sounds like, was that during college?
Brazil was when I was 8 to 13 years old.
Wow.
And China and London and SF was during college.
Yeah. Travel while you're young, that advice is very common, but I think maybe the proof is if you had to compare the person you would have been if you didn't do all that travel and where you would be today, where do you think you would be if you just grew up in France, lived in France?
I I can compare myself to my friends that I have in France, and you can see that there's not the same open-mindedness, like and the same attraction to other people and to understand other things and to like some kind of curiosity. I think I'm quite curious, and I think that come from it because I understand like all the difference, and I saw a lot of difference that can come around the world. At the same time, I must say that it's quite hard, especially when I had that Brazilian experience, because when I came back to France, it was like I lost all my friends in one day. It was not the same language anymore. It was not the same culture. And it was really a shock to come back into a place where I didn't have the codes anymore. So you need to be ready for that. And you need to understand that it's somewhat a sacrifice, but it's going to bring a lot of good things.
Yeah. Awesome. The next topic I want to talk, like the first, when I was thinking, I need to get some engineers in the Ashby room. I thought I need an enterprise and a startup person, so Microsoft and Alteryx. With that in mind, I'll open it back up. Do you guys have any questions for each other?
I thought about one.
Yes.
I always saw like Google, Apple, Microsoft as really large entities. And I always wonder, like as a manager, what is your freedom of vision and innovation and like going in the direction? Because I always wonder in those large companies, isn't that given and there's so much level of hierarchy that when it reaches your level, do you still feel like you have a real freedom in like which direction you want to go with your team? Or
Well, it's an excellent question. I feel in a lot of these cases, it is what you want to make of the job in a lot of these cases. And I think I didn't mention this. And I worked on a very tiny startup for a small time frame where I worked with like 2 founders, and I was the only person. I built the whole tech stack for them. So I kind of know what it takes to build an end-to-end. But the contrast that I see when you go into a big enterprise is when you're building the platform for yourself, you're writing a lot of code, you're seeing the big picture. A small string change, like, you make a small string change. Now in a big enterprise, now you have to think about all the languages that can get translated to, because it's not like one person for one task that you're doing it. And it could have impact on specific, if there are brand names involved. So the tiniest of the changes that you can think about can have a much wider impact. So I think it's a lot about balancing of both. I've been lucky enough to work in a team where we work on both open source project and closed source projects. So I've been fortunate and happy that I've been in a team where I've had the chance to explore, and at the same time, again, I like going deep. I always think startup is a world where you go wider and wider and wider as much as you want. And enterprise is a world where you can go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper as much as you want. So it's finding that balance. If you enjoy going in both directions, then I would say that, you'll get a chance to do it. And I'm sure there are lots of companies with a lot of teams where it might be all about going deeper. But again, you might be finding people who really like doing that as well.
yeah.
So.
Especially when we talked about ICs, I think that's the best distinguished engineers are the one that want to go as deep as possible and understand the entire stack.
Yeah. I still remember in my company, there are people who very specifically focus on languages, a specific library. There are people who are experts in just garbage collection. These are not things that happens as a part of the language where, you have these
Really
subjects.
important.
So, very important part of a software lifecycle.
Really
But again,
complex.
so those are not kind of engineers you'll generally see. And that's not the type of skill set that you might be looking for just for, just getting a startup up and running.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome.
But by the way, you mentioned Alteryx as a startup. For me, Alteryx is a somewhat large company. Like before my startup, we were like 20 people.
Right.
Now it's like 2,000.
Okay.
But compared to Microsoft, we are startup.
Yeah,
It's like
Is that Series D?
no, it's public.
It's public. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's the definition of it not being a startup.
Yeah. It's not for long. We're getting acquired by private equity.
Okay.
So
How do you feel about that? Maybe we could cut this out, but
we don't know yet.
okay, that's
It's going to be signed in March, like SEC, finance, all that. They are doing a lot of audits right now. So until March, we won't really know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of anxiety, to be honest, because like no one knows, even the leaders don't know. It's like we really, like I really believe that just the private equity firms have some strategy in mind, but we don't know what that strategy is.
It's probably an MBA strategy.
Yeah, probably.
Not an engineer's strategy. Awesome. Maybe let's close it out. We're at about half hour here. Ooh, you're both taking an MBA as engineers. I think we see it a lot in Silicon Valley, and you guys tended to go into management anyway, right? So I think it makes sense. Could you, in your own words, explain why you're doing the MBA and maybe what you want to get out of it after you graduate? Whoever wants to go.
I can start. So for me, it's really about, like, I want to stay on the engineering tracks. Like, I know some engineers do MBA because they want to switch to product management or to other aspects of the company. For me, it's really stay on the engineering, but I want to be able to talk intelligently to all the other departments of the company. I'm seeing that already as a director. Like, I need to talk to finance, to accounting, to do revenue recognition. And it's really important for me to be able to share some of the same language, understand the different concerns, and understand what are my levers or not. And I think if I want to continue to grow, it's skills that I need to acquire in one way or another. And MBA is really a way to get a lot of those skills relatively fast.
Awesome.
For me, I'm in one of these places where my customer is a software engineer. So the products that we build, it's very hard to say where does the product management end and where does the engineering start, because in a sense we are building the product for ourselves to some extent. So for the last so many years, it's like I have these conversations with my product management team, and there is always this. I always get to this point where I feel like I'm lacking something in understanding the software engineer's needs from a product standpoint rather than from an engineering standpoint, because I might have huge opinions about how a software should be or how a tool should be working. And if I start building the tools the way I want it, that's probably not what another software developer might be wanting it. So this is more of an, for me, it's more of a learning exercise to be empathetic to my own customer who is a software developer. And so to really understand what, how, where the needs are, and actually trying to bridge that gap between the product management and the engineering side there. So,
yeah, we have a lot of product management experience in the cohort,
right.
And in my short experience, I would say a software engineer building a tool for a software engineer, it makes you're probably most empathetic to the customer. I think the only thing you would be helpful to add is the process for collecting that feedback from the real feedback from your customers. And there's tools out there. I think we will have some in the electives. But yeah, there's tons of resources out there.
But just what we had in the marketing class.
Yeah,
right.
It's a lot of those learnings.
Right.
Actually, the marketing class, it's fun because it's a lot of product management
Yeah.
that we are seeing. It's like, how do you get feedback? How do you incorporate that? And how do you take action on it?
And bias is a big part of it, right? Like as software engineers, we have our own inherent bias about a lot of these things. How do you take that away? How can actually you be neutral and actually observe what do you need by putting yourself out of what you're actually building?
You to actually do the work to collect that feedback from your customer. Yeah, that's a real discipline, I'd say. Cool. I think we can end it here. I want to open it up though. Any other questions? Vijay, you didn't get to ask one.
So my question would be, what is the best part of, what do you enjoy most working in a startup environment?
So I'm not going to talk about Alteryx.
Sure.
I'm going to talk about the pure startup.
Sure.
I feel that's more startup. I think it's wearing multiple hats. It's like being in direct communication with customers, with the COO, with sales, with marketing. And like there's one person for each of those things, right? So you can interact with them more easily. You can get feedback. You can get really fast iterations. Like you don't need a lot of process, and that enable you to be extremely lean and to understand and take action way faster than you could do in a larger organization at a with way higher impact. because you mentioned like you can change one thing and that's gonna have a huge impact in that large org, but in a small company it's like the entire trajectory of the company can switch based on one feature that you might build. Like company might usually pivot. That actually happened once, and it's like, okay, that was a big deal.
Very well put. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. Hopefully we get this episode out shortly.
That was great.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for inviting
Thank you
us.
very much.